Hi, this is Brendan Davis from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock blog, and I'm here with Joel and Adam to talk about The Witch, a 2015 film directed by Robert Eggers. It's about an isolated Puritan family in the 1630s New England that comes unraveled by the forces of witchcraft and possession. That's the IMDb breakdown. I think that's pretty accurate. You probably don't want to give people more than that if they're going into the movie. So uh,
Yeah.
caution going forward. There will be spoilers. I'm sure everybody who's listening knows about The Witch, knows what it is. And getting into this topic, why don't we throw it to Joel first because this was his first time viewing the movie, and I'm interested to hear what his thoughts on it are.
Oh man, I I did enjoy this movie. I will say, as a sort of if I was going to like talk to my pre-watching The Witch self and like talk about this movie, I would have said this is kind of a feel bad movie. Like it begins with and continues with children in misery and dying for the entire run length of the whole movie. So if you're not ready for that, that can be pretty upsetting. I'm the only dad in the trio here, and I really I experienced the visceral agony of like the horror of losing a child
Hmm.
pretty sharply. Like that's one of the reasons I
Okay.
don't rewatch stuff like Salem's Lot, or not Salem's Lot. Oh, I like Salem's Lot. Pet Cemetery.
That
Pet
cemetery.
Cemetery. Yeah, that has the
Yeah,
infamous scene with the kid getting squished like a
that book.
watermelon under a
The
hammer.
book is really hard to read, but
Oh, I'm sure it is. I'm sure they Gallaghered that kid. Um, but
I,
like, okay,
Go on.
you
yeah,
were
I'm
gonna
sorry.
say something mean, weren't you, Adam? You're mean.
Sorry, go
Anyway,
ahead, Joel. I'm gonna cut you off monologue.
no, it's cool. I like when you cut me off because you always have something bitingly witty to say. So it's always delightful. You always like act like you're intruding, but I got to tell you, that's some of my favorite interactions between you and me is when you're like, "Get another thing." It's fantastic. Just so you have some delight that we capture on camera here. But okay, so despite the feel bad element of it is actually a very good movie. I was absolutely transported to the time and place. These people live in a world that is not only like technologically different than ours, but like very deeply psychologically, it is different than ours. They live in a world
Yeah.
of superstition, of witchcraft, of God being this real, tangible, like force that is daily considered. It's like so central to their lives, and it's fantastic. Um, Now, little backstory about me: I happen to be from the South, and there is some real fundamentalism there that like this reminded me of a lot. There's some
Okay.
true authenticity to it. I also happen to know a few Amish folks because again from the South. And again, there's a centrality to religion in their lives that's almost medieval, and you really get that in this film. I also really was delighted by their quaint little ways of speaking about things. I thought that was neat, and it's wonderful. Everything felt very real. Again, being in the South, I've gone down to the old farms with like the butter churns and like the like hand beaten iron farming implements and things like that. And there's such a brutality and rawness to all of it. Like we're so used to things being polished and plastic and perfectly molded for the human form. And these things are not like that at all. These are brutal, almost Stone Age feeling tools. Everything in this film is like that. The costuming is like that. The acting is really solid, and the fact that most of the people in this film are children, and they have so much put on them. There's so
Hmm.
much demanded of these poor kids, and they all really nail the parts. It's incredible. Anya Taylor Joy is in this. I didn't realize
Yeah.
this is she kind of got her start. She's great in this too. I saw her in Furiosa pretty recently. She's great in that too. So apparently, I love
Hmm.
Anya Taylor Joy's acting. She's a great actress with an incredible
The
voice.
all the actors in general seemed quite good. You know.
Oh man,
Amazing.
the,
Yeah, this was my first Anya Taylor-Joy movie, and it's like she wasn't really that famous back when this movie came out. It's
oh
like it
no,
does not surprise me at all that she has become a huge
Yeah.
star after this.
Yeah, I held off watching this movie for ages because I really don't like sort of the I don't know what you want. I know there's a term for it, but I can't remember like the kind of highbrow
Uh-huh.
horror
Oh,
You
Yeah,
know,
I've
yeah.
been recommending
horror-
this to you for a long
yeah,
time.
horror
Like,
horror
look
that's
at
sort
it.
of sneering at horror fans is kind of how I thought of a movie like this when I saw especially when I
No.
started seeing people go on about it who clearly weren't into
The
horror.
audience reaction almost
Yeah.
turned me off of this movie. I'm with
Um,
you on
Mhm,
that one, where they're like, "Oh,
mhm.
this is new horror. You
yeah,
old
Yeah.
idiots wouldn't understand this. It's cerebral. Or go to hell." This movie is monstrous and gross and great.
well,
Yeah.
what I liked about it when I saw it was some of the stuff that you're talking about, especially how it really takes seriously the worldview of the times that it's set in. And it replicates, I mean, obviously it has to take liberties and all that, but you feel like, oh, I'm in Puritan New England and they're going into the wilderness. And it is a wilderness where Satan and his witchly minions all dwell. And it's taking all of their lore seriously. Whereas I think
Mhm.
most other directors, I think if they in 2015 had taken a stab at this, the witches wouldn't have been witches in the Puritan sense. It would have been more like, no, the Puritans are misguided about their thinking on witches, and you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And so I thought it was interesting. It's like, no, I'm going to take the lore seriously, and that's what's going to make it horrifying, and that is what makes it horrifying. Obviously, we'll get into discussion later about just how supernatural the movie is and all that stuff. But I really like that it took all that stuff seriously. I like the use of language. That was something that I found very striking about it.
Mhm.
And I just think it has impeccable horror pacing.
Yes,
It
that's true. The
it,
pacing
it
is
made
fantastic.
yeah, it maintains the tension. It's amazing to me. I think what it boils down to is, and again, not to keep comparing it to other directors, but most other directors, if they tried to make a movie like this, would have made it 2 hours, and he makes it like an hour and a half, and
Mhm.
so it feels like a 2 hour movie, but it's
It
really
does.
just an hour and a half, and that's what I think allows him to sustain so much tension because it really isn't that long. Um, if it were 2 hours, I probably would have started to tune out.
Yeah, I think both with horror and comedies, going over an hour and a half is a really risky move. I
Yeah,
mean, if
you're right.
if you really know what you're doing, you can do it, but keeping either humor or horror going in people just run out of emotional juice after a while.
yeah, yeah, that's definitely true. And this also, runs the risk of being overly atmospheric, overly one tone. That was something else that kind of turned me off to it initially when I had heard about it. Is a lot of newer horror movies, especially, they immerse you in like it's like you walk into a room and somebody's playing a D minor chord and that's all they're doing.
Yeah.
And that's all,
Yeah.
you're oversaturated with this one emotion, but he manages to make it work. I don't know how. I didn't feel like I was mired in one note the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, I think, basically it's a really good drama on top of being
Okay.
a really good horror. All the like dramatic scenes between characters are so, as someone that used to act, I'm like, man, these scenes are so well written from a dramatic standpoint. I mean, because when you're writing drama, that's you basically one of the tenets of writing drama is having beat changes, which is the emotion changes. If you've got the same beat, like, people are angry, people are angry, people are angry. It's like it gets old or whatever the beat is. But it's like this movie has really good beat changes. I mean, you're on the right track there as far as it doesn't feel monotonous for that reason.
Yeah, no, the human drama was very interesting. I think I made the point to you, which was a point I had heard somebody else make, so it's not my own thought. But that
Yeah.
if you stripped out all of the horror stuff, you'd still have a good movie. You'd still have something that would be engaging.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And so, in a lot of horror movies are by design not done that way. So it definitely is sort of notable. Some horror movies, you're there for the horror, and that's what the movie's about.
Mhm.
Now,
Yeah, and I mean also just the detail adds to the horror because the fact that all the language is right, the sets were all custom built by people that could make period things, everything is so accurate
Yeah.
that you just are sucked into the world, and when bad things
Yeah.
happen, you feel it because you're not watching horror movie characters, you're watching these people, and it really affects. I mean, I get why Joel had a really hard time with it. I mean, I did too. It's a really dark movie. It's not.
Well, and
it's
they make you love the characters, right? Like the interactions that they have. You only get a couple of them, but they're all so like they're so human, right? And they have these wonderful
Yes.
flaws and strengths, and they clearly care about each other and have unique relationships to one another. Like you really feel like you're in that family just kind of watching them. So
Yep.
when they start dropping, it's like, ooh, this is painful. And they don't just like, I think only one of them, maybe three of them have reasonably quick deaths, and everyone else's is just miserable. You know,
Yeah.
it's just so
Well,
awful.
As they turn on each other too, it's
Yeah,
just
the
it's just
breakdown of
horrible
trust.
because it's not like any of the characters. Yeah, I mean, the mother is probably the closest to, you could say, somewhat villainous character. 'Cause she's always accusing the daughter, but it's like, but even her, it's like she's a very sympathetic character that's
Yeah.
going through this horrible. She's been dragged from England out to the colony, and then her husband gets them kicked out of the colony into the wilderness,
Yeah.
and then her baby disappears, and
Yeah.
it's just like, geez.
I mean,
no
I would
wonder
say she's pretty
she's
justified being angry at the daughter for
Yeah.
losing the baby. Like that's,
Yeah.
it's a pretty reasonable reaction.
Exactly. I mean, it centers on the cup a lot of the time, but she's not mad about the cup. She wouldn't be she is mad about the cup, but it's the missing baby is the thing she's really hammering when she's upset about the cup with the daughter.
He really did
It's-
seem to have a good handle on the Puritans and what like that whole idea of like going all the way back to England with the character. Whereas again, I think a lot of other
Yeah.
movies wouldn't have made that
Yeah,
leap
I-
of going back to their home in
These,
England.
these
And,
are English people, not Americans.
Yeah.
That often gets overshadowed in colonial movies.
and it's very early. This is set in what, 1630? Is that the? I mean,
Mhm.
that's very early. That's a very early period. So
Yeah,
It was-
it's the scene where the daughter and the brother are basically just talking. She's talking about windows. Don't you remember glass? We had glass windows in England, and the dog would lie in the sun. It's like just those little scenes that have no significance to the plot, but it just really cements who these people
Yeah.
are.
Well, and it paints the parents in a different light too, because you see, okay, there was like a different time in this family when the vibe
Yeah.
was a different vibe.
Yeah. And it also plays why the father is so incompetent too. It's not like he is some pioneer survivor in the wilderness. He's, these are people who came over from the civilized land of England, and now he's trying to live in the wilderness, and he's failing at it.
Well, I do want to get into the question of his competence. Like there's other topics I want to get into, but now that you're raising that, because it's something that I've heard, because I had some thoughts about like the 7 deadly sins and all that. And so I wanted to see if other people had them. And I started watching videos on YouTube, and the father's competence kept coming up. And one of the thoughts I had about that was, how incompetent is he really? Because we know that the crops are failing. We know they're not doing a good job of all this, but there's also witches there and a satanic presence. And the crops look kind of cursed to me. It doesn't necessarily look like, so there's this question of how much
question, is it supernatural or not? If it's supernatural, then you're right. He is just cursed.
Because he puts together a pretty nice looking homestead. Like I could certainly not. Yeah. But yeah, I guess on the question of whether it's supernatural, that's the other aspect of this. The movie, I don't know. I think you can read it both ways, because it depicts the witches and it doesn't really mess around with that. It's like, no, we're going to show you the witches. But I think there's enough plausible deniability where you could be like, well, yeah, we're seeing the witches, but in actuality, that's what was the Anya Taylor-Joy Thomasin? That's the Thomasin character, as she said, going into the woods at night when she sleeps to be a witch. And so we're kind of getting this unreliable narrator thing. But I don't know, Joel, what was your read on that as you were watching it? Did you just sort of accept all the supernatural elements?
Oh, man. Yeah, it's one of those things where the movie doesn't really, I feel like the movie plays its hand in the final scene. So spoiler for the movie, I think it's supernatural.
Mm-hmm.
There's just a little bit too much going wrong. I mean, I'm sure that a lot of this is centered around Thomasin, but it's not all centered around her, losing the baby has to do with her and that she's the other one in the scene, but it's like the movie shows you a ancient crone who sacrifices it and grows young again. Same thing with her brother. Her brother wanders off in the wood, and she's involved with that, but he wanders off. he gets seduced by a witch, and whatever happens to him happens to him, and he dies hideously. You know, like, yeah, she's with the twins when they get killed by a witch, but like, it's clear, like, again, the movie is showing you that it is another different witch that is doing that. Like,
to go back, but to bring up the possibility of a non-supernatural explanation, when the boy goes in the woods, he goes in there with Thomasin, and so it's entirely
she's there in all of them.
So it's entirely possible that it was her. That was just we were being given sort of a skewed vision of what was going on. You totally can do that, and the movie is smart in that it gives you enough for you to bring that plausible deniability to it. But here's my read on it. The movie is taking their worldview 100% seriously, right? It's saying that no, they were right. This was happening. This is their reality, and it's only our modern, like, scientific-minded bias that's even letting us see it in another way. Like, if by some miracle we were all Puritans and they sat us down and did this as a shadow play, right? We would just be like, oh, 'twas the witch and the ministrations of the devil that played upon this poor family and their prideful, lustful, etc. souls. You know, that would have been our read on it. Yeah. It's only because we live in a postmodern era where we're like, oh, well, perhaps it is only it's some kind of psychological thing and unreliable narrative. I don't think that's the only reason. I think it's also because they're kind of doing the thing sort of thing where it's like the paranoia and the sort of them turning on each other, and the questions of who is the witch? Are people faking being a witch? Like, what's going on? It's sort of like, I think he does want that doubt in your mind. Absolutely. But I do kind of agree with you. I think it's in service of the supernatural element to kind of
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say to kind of make that, like, when the goat reveals itself, that's when it's sort of like the hammer falls, and you're like, oh, okay, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, basically, to take the point that the theory that Thomasin is a witch the entire time through the movie, that doesn't hold with the scene when the goat appears and has her sign the book. Because why is he having her sign a book if she's been the witch the whole time? So that doesn't fit. But ultimately, though, I don't think it matters. Because this is a story of, once again, this is a really good drama. It's about how the people react, whether they're going insane from diseased crops or they're just paranoid and turning on each other, or whether it's supernatural. Ultimately, the thing that makes this movie work really well, it's about how do the characters respond to this crazy stuff that's happening to them, whatever the cause is.
The diseased crop thing is kind of interesting because that's obviously it's not like currently, I think it's not a widely accepted theory, but it's one of the explanations. But it's certainly one that the director might have considered. The other one that I found interesting, I remember I read a book called Wayward Puritans back many years ago, so I can't remember all the details of it. But it was about the Puritans, and one of the ideas in it was that one of the things that led them to have sort of the witch craze outbreak there was this fear of the forest and the wilderness and sort of seeing Satan in every shade. And you see that like the writings of Cotton Mather and stuff like this, just like the idea that there's like an evil in the, and that it sort of creates like illusions of evil around you. And I liked how this movie used landscape to that effect, where you just had this sense of pervading evil in all of the wilderness shots. It was really effective, just sort of like this almost late H.P. Lovecraft idea of the land itself sort of having a personality.
Well, and it does. Like, there's a reason people worshipped mountains and forests, If you've ever been in real raw wilderness before and there's no one else around and it's just you and the enormity of nature, you really do, some primal part of you wakes up and it's like, we need to greet the forest for it is hungry. Like, that's real. That's a very real psychological phenomenon. Now, admitting to being insane. Either good.
One thing I will say, like, is just being from New England, the one part of this that, and maybe I think he's from New Hampshire, so he might have a different perspective than I do on this aspect of it. but I think it was filmed in Canada or something, right? It wasn't filmed.
It was filmed in Canada. Yeah,
And-
he wanted to film it in New England, but he
Hmm.
couldn't afford it.
And I could be wrong here because it's not like I'm like constantly studying the trees around me, but I feel like the forest doesn't quite look like a New England forest.
No.
The trees seem too tall. That works to good effect in the movie though, so I don't think it's a problem. But all, there's just more varieties of trees around here.
This reminds me of an anecdote. I was reading The Wendigo by Algernon Blackwood to my kids the other night, and they were talking about the Yukon territories, this raw, horrifyingly Western wilderness that is so far beyond the civilized world. I live to the west of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was a moment, dude.
The Yukon.
That's pretty amusing.
I was like, oh my God, where's the Yukon? Oh.
Now here's a question: why was it called The Witch when we see multiple witches throughout the movie and in the end, but it's just called The Witch?
I've never thought about that.
Well, they could have called it The Coven, but isn't it sort of about the one witch that's messing with the family? It feels like it's.
But there's more than one messing with the family. We see two distinct witches mess with the family. We see the crone and we see the young bosomy witch, right?
I thought they were the same
witch.
witch. I assumed they were the same witch.
I don't think so.
Witches being able to look like young.
I don't think it's the same one. I think they're different witches because when we see them,
you've clearly been fooled by a witch before, sir.
Well, no, because at the end when we see the coven, there's the crone witch, but there's also like younger, more beautiful looking witches there. So I think that we're meant to think that those are two different witches. I mean, they could be the same witch as well.
I assume she used the dead baby to make herself look young to seduce the son. Was my theory.
I thought that was so she could fly.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, well, so she used it on her broomstick. You have the win there. Yeah.
Well, you could do two things with a dead baby. You had to use the whole baby buffalo.
Yeah, your book 101 uses for
so my theory is it's called The Witch because it's about Thomasin and Thomasin becoming the witch, and so in the end, she's the witch.
Actually, that makes she does become a witch at the end.
That's
so
true.
You're totally right. That's a very logical explanation.
You get so excited about that. I'd be like, yes, of course.
I don't know. It's a revelation. I've been puzzled by it for years.
But I don't know. The I guess the other thing too is this time when I was watching it, I obviously the father's pride is a big theme in the movie, and I noticed that the first time, but this time I was like, I feel like there's like 7 family members, so that must be they must each be connected to the 7 sins if you include the baby in the tally. And so I started looking it up. I'm like, okay, people must have come up with. So I found there was a video on YouTube of somebody who broke it down, but there was also a TV Tropes thing where basically somebody broke it down. They all broke it down a little differently, but the consensus seemed to be William was pride, Catherine was either envy or wrath, Thomasin was greed, or one of them put her as something else too. But then Caleb was obviously lust. Jonas and Mercy were both either both wrath and sloth or gluttony and sloth, and the baby was either gluttony or some other sin slotted in. A baby really doesn't have too many.
Yeah, it's a baby.
It can only be sloth or gluttony, right? Like there's not really, maybe envy, maybe. Because all you can be is envious if you're just a lump on the ground, right? Like
it's true. Yeah. I can remember my youngest nephew when he was a baby. It's like my 2 older nephews would be playing, and he was just like, before he could walk, you could just see him. He's like, he wants to get up and play with his brothers, but he's stuck in this stupid chair, and they're running around having fun.
That's what I mean.
No, a baby can be envious, definitely.
But I thought that was kind of interesting, like 7 family members, 7 deadly sins. And I would probably be more inclined to see I don't know. I was sort of on the fence of whether the mom was envious or wrathful. Those both seemed pretty present in equal measure with her.
I think by the end, she was mostly wrath.
Yeah. I think, if I was, wrath is definitely the one, because I mean, even the things she's angry about aren't envy. I mean, she's angry. Yeah. She's angry about, the baby disappeared. She's angry about the cup. She's angry about not being in England.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, that's fair.
there's so many anger things, and it's like envy. I mean,
Well, I
I
guess where
don't.
envy I could see is there's a sharp contrast between her and Thomasin. Thomasin is youthful. The
Yeah,
mom is made to look very puritanically plain and sort of becoming very matronly, right? And so
I don't know. I just feel it's like the daughter just. I mean, yeah. I mean, she is youthful, but she's kind of in a dead end situation in her
yeah, yeah.
life out in the world. I just feel like I don't know.
But from the mom's perspective, she's got her whole life ahead of her. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I don't know. I don't. The envy doesn't work for me.
okay, no, that's
I just
fair. That's
don't.
fair. We'll go with Wrath. We'll go with Wrath.
Well, we don't.
Um,
You can go with envy if you want. I'm just
well,
saying that.
to me, it's not even so much, about assigning one to each character as much as it's like
Okay, what are
just
what
the
are the sins they're guilty of? But
yeah,
yeah,
and
I just don't see any actions motivated by envy in it. Even you could go, oh, she'd be envious because of this, but where is that in the story? Is really my question. With Wrath, you can point to
yeah,
all
I
these.
agree.
She's being wrathful. She's being
Well, where
wrathful.
she tries to murder her daughter, I would say that's a pretty wrathful
Yeah.
action.
Yeah, well, exactly. I'm saying it's like you could cook up a theory about her being envy, but you can't point to it
So
on
so
the
let's say
screen.
let's say the baby is envious then, and that the Jonas and Mercy are gluttonous and slothful. That would be the
Yeah, but I
You
mean,
can see those
it's
big gluttonous and slothful.
I,
Yeah.
once again, this is just a theory people on the internet have. I feel like I don't know. I don't know
well,
if it's
I think it's
valid theory or not.
well, I think if you have seven family members and you're really emphasizing the role of sin, and there's characters where like there's a specific sin that's very clear, like the father
Well,
come
pride.
out
Oh
come out
yeah,
to
he has a
pride.
little
The,
monologue about
yeah.
pride. You see him praying to
and
himself,
and
and
Caleb clearly has lustful issues. Like that's clearly his sin. And
yeah,
Thomasin is lured to sign the book through greed, right? Like he offers her the material joys of the world as the thing that he's going to give her.
mhm.
Um,
Yeah. Actually, and two, what does she talk? I mentioned it earlier. I said it was flavor detail, not important to the plot. Her remembering the glass windows
yeah,
in the house.
yeah,
Ah, so there. Okay. Yeah,
but
yeah, okay. You're winning me over to
yeah.
this theory. So,
Gotta
But
live deliciously, Adam.
this sort of raised another question for me too, which is what exactly was the father's heresy that got him kicked out of the plantation? Because we never really know, like, what it is. It's just he just disagrees with the
I think,
council, and
yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think it is just. I mean, I don't think it's even important. It's the fact that he's in a Puritan community and he wants to have his own
yeah,
viewpoint that's different from every. I mean, it is just. I mean, to go away from the seven, it's like stubbornness is really his big failing. It's like and I mean, yeah, and he can't even set it aside as far as his family's safety, as far as them
yeah.
staying there. It's stubbornness. Is his biggest trait.
Well, he even takes the blame. He even says it's all his fault towards the
Oh,
end.
I
And,
know, I know.
yeah.
And once
Well, I mean,
again,
but
it's
it is
too
his
late.
fault,
Too
though.
late.
No, it is. That's what
Yeah,
I'm saying. I mean, I'm agreeing with Adam that like
yeah,
the stubbornness is I mean, because none of this would have happened if he had stayed at the plantation, presumably, or if he had
yeah.
gone
I mean,
back to the plantation earlier. So
it's almost like the town fathers or whoever they are. It's almost like all he has to do is just recant, and it's like, okay, we're gonna let this go, but nope, he
uh,
has to go on a big lecture.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
is legitimately
watching
saying
this
he's better
movie.
than everyone there. Like, come on, dude, really?
Yeah, it's well, yeah. Once again, it's yeah. I'm watching this movie a second time is really fascinating. This was my second time
mm,
watching it, and like just watching the opening scene, knowing everything that's gonna happen, really, really, it's like, yeah, man, wow, the
yeah.
consequences of what you're doing right now are so horrifying. It
Well,
it
and
this movie really works. It really works well watching it again.
Yeah, I was impressed. I was worried it wasn't going to hold up on a second viewing, because it was my
Yeah,
second viewing too. But
yeah, I wasn't sure, but because I loved it the first time, but I was like, yeah, but it being once again it being an hour and a half too. It's like, man, this movie is just for a movie that you could say this movie is slow, but it doesn't feel slow at all watching it. It's really just it just has one really good emotional beat after another.
yeah, I mean, again, I think that 1 hour 30 minute runtime really is what, because a lot of period pieces that are in this style would just be longer, and I think they were really smart about tightening that runtime.
Yeah.
But I guess my only thought on his potential heresy, the only thing I could even think of is, well, maybe it had something to do with infant baptism or something, because he clearly didn't baptize a baby.
I kind of wondered about that too. I was like, wow, because I was trying to remember, because I was trying to remember, was the baby in the first scene or was the baby born after?
I think it was born after, but I could be wrong because I didn't notice even on this viewing if he was in the thing.
So there is kind of a time jump. Obviously, they leave town, then boom, there's a whole plantation. But
there was also some question, like, do you think Caleb was baptized? Because he even kind of raised that issue too. And
that's what I got. That's what I thought. I get the impression Caleb wasn't baptized either. I've now forgotten this because I watched this on Wednesday.
Okay. Because I'm pretty sure the Puritans did infant baptism. I could be wrong about that, but
I don't know, actually. It's nothing. I can't imagine they wouldn't. I feel like if Puritans didn't baptize kids, it would be something, having studied Puritans in American literature class, I feel like that would have come up as a major heresy.
Yeah, I can't recall, but Joel, you oh no, you just seemed like you were
I'm just listening to you guys.
Oh, okay. I thought you were looking at something, so I was.
No, you guys were like, before the podcast. You're like, you're the only one with youthful energy, Joel. We're a bunch of crippled old men, and then for this whole runtime, you guys have been like, oh my god, this.
It's like the opposite of the Mike Tyson fight that just happened, right?
It is.
Yeah.
Oh god, am I the Logan Paul in that scenario? Yeah.
Oh, wait a second.
Well, I mean, it's the opposite in that I
object to this comparison.
But well, I don't know. I think Adam and I were both feeling kind of groggy, and you have more energy than we do. You're just younger than us, so
Hey, you guys are knocking it out of the ballpark.
Well, I think actually we're probably starting to run out of steam because I think we've covered just about everything. I don't know. Are there any other topics on this that I've overlooked?
God, this is a brutal movie, but it's really, really good.
One thing I will say is those twins were utterly hateful. They did a good job of making me dislike those characters.
I also wanted the children to get eaten by a witch.
Huh?
I also wanted the children to get eaten by a witch, and I got everything I wanted.
But I don't know. It was just amusing how and the I guess the other thing which we kind of touched on was just the way that they really did a good job of depicting how it must have been at that time when a witchcraft accusation flew at somebody. Like the way that they sort of laid the groundwork where she told the kids, well, I'm and she's obviously just kind of doing the kid thing of like trying to scare her sister. But then that comes back as like, but she said, I'm the witch of the wood. It just was like they quoted her verbatim, and it was, it seemed, so condemning. So
according to answers.com, which is the most reputable source on the internet, Puritans did baptize infants.
Okay. So it's weird that they were not baptized. So that must have been it. That must have been the thing right there. Why would you object to that? That seems so stupid in retrospect.
Because
it might have had to do with predestination or something. Who knows? It
also, it also could be that he feels that, you need to accept baptism. That could be because basically baptism is making a choice for your child that they're a Christian, as opposed to, it's like how there's confirmation. And it basically may be, so I think you could potentially see baptism as something like confirmation where the child needs to accept it, but that would lead to an awful lot of babies going to hell back in the 1600s. Sure.
Yeah, see, they even bring that up in the movie. Our kid is in hell. Like, see,
Yeah.
way to go,
Both our
Actually,
kids are in hell.
that would
Both
explain
our
her
kids.
anger when she says that to the father. She's like, "Our child is in hell." She's like yelling at the father. It's like, "See, you idiot! We should have baptized our child."
Mm.
So that
You were
that
wrong.
actually got really edge to that line if she's laying that in him. If it was his decision not to, that would really, wow. Okay.
I would have went and split some wood too. Yeah.
Yeah, the splitting of the wood. That I did like that they kept going back to that every
Chopping
time, like
wood.
things were not working out. Yeah, just chopping more wood.
That'll
There's a huge mountain of wood behind
Yeah.
him near the end of the movie too.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, granted, you would want a lot of wood, but it's like, man, that's a big pile.
it's a lot.
I think
used
the
to split
issue was
wood.
the wood to crop ratio was just so off.
Exactly. Exactly.
But yeah, so I don't know. Any other thoughts on it before we mosey on out?
No, I think that's pretty much it. Would you recommend The Witch to someone?
Yes.
I think
have.
yeah,
I'm the one that kept bugging Brendan to watch
Yeah.
it. So.
There you go.
Yeah.
So that's a
I
review
would recommend it, but I would also say, like, it's definitely not going to be for every single viewer.
No.
I think some people won't have the same reaction. I thought it was a great movie. I was pleasantly surprised the first time I saw it, and I still enjoyed it this time around. I was a little annoyed with how it was set up on Amazon Prime, but that's a whole separate situation, so I won't go into that.
Can't blame The Witch for Amazon. That's a whole different evil.
Well, no, because part of it had to do with the company that produces it. But I don't want to get into that because it's a technical issue that doesn't really affect the quality of the movie itself. But yeah, Joe, would you recommend it?
Yeah, I think so. It's really watchable. Like you said, 90-minute runtime. It's in and out pretty quick. It's got really good atmosphere. It's got that same energy that the thing has, where you're always kind of questioning, like, ooh, who is the witch thing real? Are they just is their tiny little society falling apart? Evokes the Salem witch trials really strongly. There's some just really cool, creepy imagery at the very end where they're all flying up with the firelight.
Yeah,
that was
cool.
Yeah.
I feel
yeah,
I've seen people try to imitate that scene too, that witch coven at the fire scene. And
that's based on a painting, isn't it? Isn't there a painting where that's happening?
There is. Yeah, I can't place it, but
I think it's called The Witches. Like it's a real. The name of the painting is very simple, so it's hard to find online. But
there was I can't remember the name of the movie. It might have been Witches. No, I forget what it was called. But Rob Zombie had a movie set in Salem, and there was a scene at the beginning. I think it came out after this movie of a coven of witches doing something kind of similar. Yeah, I felt like, that must have been because of the witch, or I could be wrong. Maybe my timeline is off.
It's probably referencing that same painting. It's a really famous painting.
Well, I get the painting reference, but it also felt a lot like that actual scene to me.
Okay.
I thought.
Fair enough.
But again, I could be wrong.
So as my final thought on whether it was supernatural or not, I do think the movie's more interesting if it's supernatural, just from the standpoint that it is supposed to be a movie from such a Puritan mindset. I think taking it as, okay, we're in their world and we're seeing their world is more interesting than it's just a hallucination.
I agree. I think that's what makes it so compelling, is that we're going to fully commit to the point that we're using their language. That, like, I think he took journals and like kind of cobbled together dialogue and then massaged it into the shape that he wanted, which I don't know, as a GM, that kind of is reminiscent of things I've done when I've needed handouts or whatever. So
yeah,
it's an interesting technique. But yeah, so no, I guess we can end it there, and we'll be back on. I think we're probably going to shift to a different style of movie next time. I don't know what we're going to do, but we'll discuss it after the podcast. And until next time, we will talk to you later.